Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Boston MPO's UPWP committee. My name is Derek Cravat. I'm the manager of MPO activities and liaison to the Boston MPO at MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning. Before we do introductions, I will just do a quick reading of the meeting guidelines. So all participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. Participants are able to mute and unmute themselves, but to participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function by either clicking the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom, or you can use the reactions button in the toolbar, and I will then call on participants. If you are dialing in by phone, you can use the *9 button to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Matt Archer via the chat box or by email at marcher@ctps.org or by phone at 857-702-3708. I'll now just quickly read the accessibility statement. So this meeting is being recorded. The meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level AA standards, as well as revised section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in the meeting, you can also contact Matt Archer of MPO staff at marcher@ctps.org or by phone at 857-702-3708. So with that, we will do a quick roll call of members, or did you want to do the, should we do Srileka's introduction first, or do you want to do roll call first, Sandy?
I was just doing the roll call first.
Okay, perfect. So let's do the roll call. I will get up my list of members here. So I will read off the affiliation, and then if you're here, please just say here. So we have myself, Mass.OTP. As the chair, I'm here. Do we have MAPC?
Good morning, Eric Barrasso with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Great. Town of Arlington.
Daniel Amstead, Senior Transportation Planner, Town of Arlington.
Okay. City of Boston, Transportation Department. Okay. City of Framingham. Okay. Midway. Okay. City of Newton.
David, excuse me, David Kozis, Transportation Coordinator for Newton DPW.
Great. Town of Norwood. It's not Tom
Hey,
O'Rourke.
good morning, Tom O'Rourke with the town of Norwood representing Trick Subregion.
Awesome. Good morning. City of Somerville, representing Intercore.
City of Somerville, Tom Pennant, representing Mayor Ballantyne in the Intercore.
Great. And RTAC.
Leonard Diggins, RTAC, Advisor Council here.
Great. Good morning. And we have an MBTA Advisory Board. Okay. I think with that, we can move on to the introductions for Srileka. Do you want to take that, Sandy? Or...
Oh, well, Srileka can, but I just will say very briefly that I've really enjoyed working with the committee over the last 5 years, and I'll still be around to advise and support, and I'll be here for the meetings, at least everyone for the spring, hopefully. But I'm very happy to be handing over responsibility for managing the UPWP and supporting this committee to Srileka Murthy, the new UPWP manager. We've been working together for a couple months now, and I have found her very capable and smart, and I'm sure she'll do a terrific job. So I will just, Srileka, hand it over to you to introduce yourself a bit.
Sure, thank you, Sandy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Srileka Murthy. I am taking over from the very capable Sandy Johnston. But of course, for this UPWP cycle, we'll be working together on projects and meetings and that kind of thing. But I am so excited to meet you all and to be working with this committee. on what I am sure will be a great UPWP season this year and for the years to come. Thank you.
Welcome, Srileka. Looking forward to working with you. So with that, I think we can move to our next item, which is public comments. Are there any members of the public that wish to make a comment? Okay, seeing none. If you do have any comments, you can provide them in writing to staff by emailing Srileka at smurthy, smurthy @ctps.org. Or if you have any comments during the meeting, feel free to raise your hand or type them into the chat. So I think we're going to skip this next item. We'll endorse the minutes and the summary from the November meeting at the next meeting when that's available. But for now, I think we'll move to agenda item 4, which is review of federal fiscal year 2023 UP development schedule. So I'll hand it over to Srileka or Sandy.
Either of us, Srileka, you want to go for it?
Sure. So this agenda item is really just to confirm or sort of update you all that we moved the February 17th meeting to today, of course. And we will be, the rest of the schedule is likely going to stay the same with the exception of April 7th due to the MPO board moving their meetings to the 2nd and 4th week of April. We will likely be following the same schedule, but of course, if there are any updates and if we need to meet sooner than April 14th, I think is the date we discussed, Sandy, we will of course update you all and update the website as well.
Okay, thanks, Srileka. Any questions on schedule? Yep, David.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if do we think that we have all the ideas already generated or and ready to start to pick from, or are there different activities that will be happening to continue to generate project ideas?
So we're basically at the stage where we've kind of wrapped up all of the idea gathering activities. We need to pull it all together into the universe. We closed the public facing UPWP study ideas survey on Monday at the end of February, and we've finished wrapping up our public outreach activities for that. So we're gonna work on pulling together the draft universe, and that how rapid progress we can make on that will actually also impact the schedule for the next meeting, whether we can get that ready for 2 weeks from now, March 17th, or whether we'll have to wait until an April meeting. We did get a pretty voluminous response this year, so.
Great. Yeah. Did you have a follow-up, David?
Yeah, I mean, so I had one idea for a study that how would I throw that out at this point in this meeting or through an email, or what do you think?
I think an email would be best,
Yeah.
just so we can have it in writing.
Okay, so I sent an email out a couple of weeks ago. I thought I sent an email out, but maybe it didn't go out because I didn't hear back from anybody that I sent it to. And can you maybe, I think I included you and Tegan as well. So can you just take a look and see if you received an email from me a couple of weeks ago about an idea about parking policies and meter rates in different communities?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
That's so funny. I was just going to say that, Sandy, I think we have a meeting on Monday to talk about parking issues, which is sort of a follow-up from a regional convening we did with many of the municipalities in the inner core, where we heard, I would say, like pretty much a consensus that like they're struggling with the development of lab space and like getting the parking like of labs and mixed use sites. So that's something I'd like to talk about and see if there's potential for collaboration between MAPC and CTPS and some type of a UPWP study there. So I just wanted to throw that out. I know we're having that conversation, Sandy, on Monday. That's slightly different from what David's talking about. And maybe there's opportunity to combine something there too as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Len Diggins.
Yeah, thank you. So to Sandy or Shalika, did you say you got a lot of ideas? You say voluminous?
I believe that is the word I used. And in fact, Len, I was particularly thinking of the meeting that I did with the advisory council a couple weeks ago.
Okay, well, no, this is great. So that makes me look even further for the Big Bang. So thank you.
David.
All right, maybe I'll just take a minute to throw the idea out, which was in that email from a couple of weeks ago. And I'll just take a second. It started from an email, I think it was from the parking manager in Revere, who sent out an email to a bunch of cities and towns just asking about how different communities handled their municipal parking lots in terms of fees that they charge and different types of permits that they issue. And it was interesting because I watched a whole bunch of different responses come back, and it seems that every city and town has their own unique types of permits that they issue for different reasons and charge all different amounts. So I started thinking that it would be really useful for anyone who works in parking policy in the region to have some kind of compendium, I guess, of surveys that could be done, I guess interviews as a UPWP study that looks at different policies and compares them and summarizes them in different ways. So that was the idea that I had thrown out.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think between MAPC and CTPS, we're definitely interested in tackling some of this work, and we'll definitely put it in the universe for discussion.
And
Thanks.
would there be any overlap? I know there's a scope under review now for the future of the curb phase 3. So if there is any overlap there, I know that mentions parking strategies.
But it would not necessarily be only on the curb. It's maybe even focus more on municipal parking lots, off-street parking lots.
Okay. All right. Len? I think you're muted, Len.
Yes, sorry about that. I should have put my hand down. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yep, Tom Ben.
Thanks. Yeah, David, I saw that and I thought that was interesting. And the question, and I think it was just answered. I was wondering, are you thinking just municipal parking lots, or are you looking at, meters, in your business districts, things like that? Because the other thing that and it may be part of the study that was just mentioned, is the concern, one of the concerns that we're seeing with small businesses is the impact on parking with the installation of bike and bus lanes, and the loss of parking due to that, to small storefront, businesses that have always relied on that parking. So I don't know if that gets it, now it becomes a lot bigger issue, but I don't know if that's being picked up, in one of the other studies or not, but I think it's, it all kind of ties together, you know what I mean? So, and I know meter policies are different everywhere, so that's a good, I think that would be very interesting for municipalities to have, so that they could, kind of compare themselves to their neighbors and things like that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, good discussion. Any other questions on the schedule or ideas? Okay, seeing none, I think we can move to the next agenda item, which is presentation of proposed changes to the UPWP budgeting process.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. I'll be talking about this one. So just bear with me, folks, for a little bit, because this is a little bit nitty gritty, and I'm going to do my best to explain it, but I expect that there will be questions, and we do welcome that. So we, staff, wanted to discuss with you today some ideas that we've developed for extra ease of budgeting and more efficiency in doing our work within the UPWP, within UPWP funded tasks. This would involve some reorganization of the budgets for the fiscal year 23 UPWP that's currently under development, but not really reorganizing the content of the document, at least this year. I want to emphasize that we're asking for your input on this today because while we feel this is something that would be really helpful, we know that you, the committee, have also expressed a desire to help make our budgeting methods more appropriately support the actual work being carried out as it evolves and changes in the past. So the key point that we're trying to do is the first bullet on the slide says that we want to consolidate UPWP tasks into categories that would be the authoritative budget for reporting and amendment purposes. And I'll show in a moment what that means in more detail. So we wouldn't need an amendment every time we needed to transfer money from a task to another one, but rather when we're transferring money only between the high-level categories. We'd continue to provide estimated budgets for tasks and report on each individual task monthly. And again, I'll show an example in a moment. I do want to emphasize that this framework would require approval from Federal Highways. We've conducted some background research that indicates other MPOs do budget in this fashion, and Derek has looked into it for us a little bit, and his OTP has indicated they're willing to take the request to FHWA, but we're not quite sure how FHWA will react at this moment. Matt, if we could go to the next slide, please. So the table on the screen here is pulled from table 3.1 in the fiscal year 2022 UPWP, and I'm kind of using it to demonstrate what we're recommending here. The 6 tasks colored in white wrap up into an overall category in the orange bar, the support to the MPO subtotal. Currently, if we want to transfer money between any of these 6 tasks, if it meets a certain threshold, we would have to execute an amendment or modification to the UPWP. If we can make the total in the orange bar the authoritative number, we would reduce the number of modifications as amendments and be able to transfer funds within the task budgets to accommodate changing needs and resources as the fiscal year goes on. We would, of course, still provide estimates and reporting for each individual line. The major benefit of this change would be the ability to enhance our work on specific items as we go through the process of scoping and then doing the actual work. As you know, and I'll touch again on this more in a moment, the UPWP budget is laid out many months before we begin work on the tasks and up to 18 months in advance of their completion. So the budgets that are attached to individual task items reflect kind of guesstimates that sometimes fail to capture needs that emerge or resources that change. And being able to freely transfer funds between tasks within the same category would kind of allow us to dynamically rebalance our resources as the year goes on, which would simplify our workflows and we think create a material overall benefit in the not just in the efficiency of our work, but actually in the quality of the work products. Next slide, please, Matt. So don't take this as kind of gospel. These are our current best guess at what the categories might look like and how they correspond to sections of the current UPWP. So you can see we kind of break out logical sets of tasks that are linked thematically to become larger budget categories. And the intent, if FHWA indicates an openness to budgeting this way, would be that we would, of course, present the final list of categories to you as part of the draft fiscal year 23 UPWP and keep you informed in the process of developing them. Next slide, please. So why are we doing this and why now? So there are a lot of things that are currently coming together to make it urgent, even though, as I said before, this has been a long-running issue. So some of these are, things you've heard of. Some of them are more recent. There's one of the major things behind it is this kind of slow process of amending the UPWP. So a proposed change in a line items budget that's over 25% of the current budget requires an amendment to the UPWP. The process of developing that amendment, presenting it to the UPWP committee and the MPO board, 21-day public comment period, and FHWA review can be a 4 to 6 week process. Often longer if you also include our internal process of figuring out how to balance the budgets. There's also a lot of uncertainty now and for the foreseeable future as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the bipartisan infrastructure law is bringing us kind of the benefit of additional funding, but also a lot of uncertainty in the form of needing to hire and allocate staff resources differently, and also new requirements for our reporting, for our work, and the like, that we're not sure, because we're still waiting on guidance for much of it, if we're really going to know when we endorse the 2023 UPWP, what that's going to bring and what's that's going to require of us. So all of this adds up to a kind of known long-term need and a high level of current and future uncertainty that we feel justifies looking into budgeting slightly differently. Next slide, please. So what we're looking for from you today is kind of a general sense, not a vote, not an action, but do you support us exploring this framework further, taking it to FHWA to see if they would approve us budgeting in this fashion, all the like. I think we are almost only going to go to OTP and or to FHWA and ask them for just an informational opinion one way or the other, but we do want to get your guidance on how we should go ahead and tackle this in the coming months.
So I'm just going to start, and then we can go through folks' members. But I just want to say that, first of all, my first question is, what other MPOs? You mentioned other MPOs are exploring this and have and kind of budget this way. So I'm curious about that. And then I just want to preface some of this by saying the federal requirement for UPWP changes is just to send Federal Highway a revised UPWP and to have the MPO vote to endorse it. They do not require at the federal level a public comment period. We learned that this year. I think some of the public participation procedures mentioned that. So I think one alternative to having this change in amendment procedures on the sort of like to reporting to Federal Highway could be changing the procedures for the UPWP committee having to review it. And, with the small changes, like you mentioned, Sandy, maybe unless it's a significant change in these categories, that would be MPO specific procedures as opposed to the federal procedures, if that makes sense. I think the only federal requirement, again, is to revise the UPWP and have the MPO vote on it, which is much less time consuming, and Federal Highway would be more likely to support the current system as it is. So I just wanted to throw that out there as kind of some food for that. And then if you want to address any of that or talk about that first question with other MPOs, I'd be curious.
Yeah, so I'll just address the second part first about the amendment requirement. Yes, as Derek said, we were, I think we had all forgotten that it's not a federal requirement actually to put UPWP amendments out for public comment. As we do, we would, if we were to stop doing that, we would of course get want the committee's guidance on that, though we were planning to bring it back for a future discussion. We would have to change some of the language for the fiscal year 23 UPWP and amend the public outreach plan. Those are both very doable. It would just be a little bit more, but not a substantial barrier. And then Srileka did the research on other MPOs that budget in this fashion. So if she wants to talk about it a little bit.
Sure. So we looked at 5 MPOs kind of across the country. The one that I'll highlight right now is the Mid-America Regional Council, which spans Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. And it's comprised of about 119 separate governments within that 2-state region. And the way that they organize their budget, I found really interesting. They do it in 2 ways. They have expenditures by fund category. So that's general fund, special revenue fund, enterprise fund, 911 capital fund, and an indirect and clearing fund. So they have that, but they also split up their budget by policy goal areas. Efficient transportation, healthy environment, competitive economy, effective local government, things like that. They have their budget split under like overarching policy themes. And of course, this is, arguably a much more complicated kind of MPO region going between 2 different departments of transportation, 2 different states. But I guess Sandy and I found the splitting of, or the division of the budget by policy area to be really interesting. Another MPO closer to home, of course, is the Central Massachusetts Metropolitan Planning Organization, so in the Worcester County area. They split their budget fairly similar to how we do. They have 4 overarching elements, and then within those elements, more specific, maybe planning goals or policy goals, such as corridor studies, congestion management, project development, asset management, livability. And they have overarching budgets for each of those line items, but not for specific tasks under those projects. So I guess what we kind of took away from this is that, of course, there's a lot of different ways you can budget and a lot of different ways that different MPOs break down their budgets, but just given the research that we did and the kinds of MPOs we looked at, it really seems like there is some flexibility, at least with other regions, of kind of consolidating very specific line items into overarching kind of categories, even with some specificity. There will be a difference between congestion management projects, projects versus sort of equity related projects, as an example. But it is possible, and it is feasible, I would argue, for the MPO to consider kind of just a different budgeting practice.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. So I could go to Daniel.
Thanks. My comment is that I'm generally supportive of the idea or the concept of sort of like reducing the administrative burden on staff and on us on the board for going through the process of doing an amendment or something, and then sort of running through the public engagement period for that. If it's for a small or sort of negligible sort of change, or even something that's sort of a single item. My basic question is referring to the transparency of kind of what, if you're moving things around underneath a category, like what is the threshold of, I mean, I think you mentioned, Sandy, like 25% for changes to, I guess, tasks right now that would need a endorsement or an amendment, or the way that we have it set up right now. So it's the same sort of question as, if you've got what would sort of trigger a more thorough or review or concern by this committee or by the board? Like if you've got a project that's budgeted at 50,000 and then you're like, well, no, we're going to take 40,000 away and it's only going to be 10,000. It's like, so what level of notification or transparency comes with this framework?
So we have not gone into that level of detail yet, but I would say that is certainly something we'd be looking to this committee for guidance on. And certainly we can throw some proposals out there, but that's precisely the kind of question that I think we would be asking you to help define the procedures for and the thresholds, because you're right that there would need to be a considerable amount of transparency about it, both for this committee, for the board, and indeed for the public as well.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So again, I'm generally supportive. I think, yeah, we need to talk about just how, certainly talk about going forward, how we would sort of see that, maybe get more regular updates on projects if they are changing. So thanks.
Thanks, Daniel. Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very supportive of this. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that having the flexibility for the staff to be able to tweak budgets over the course of the year. I think, as Sandy said, the UPWP process is kind of challenging from a budgeting standpoint, because we're making decisions on work and projects, and then oftentimes those things aren't scoped for many months, sometimes a year later. And things change, priorities come up, and I think having this flexibility is really good. And just the staff time involved of having to go through and do the administrative modification, and that takes time. That's kind of a waste of time in my mind. So I'm very supportive of this.
Thanks, Eric. Tegan?
Thanks, Derek. I do just want to reinforce what Sandy said, just from my perspective, which is that transparency is 100% a commitment that I have and that staff has. And so to Sandy's point about working with you on how to make sure you get the level of engagement that you want to have, of course, we're working to reduce some level of administrative burden so that we can have more meaningful conversations with this committee and with the board about the work itself, right? And how the staff allocate their time. So I just wanted to reinforce the I think that we can have a very healthy conversation between us about what level of information is most useful and interesting to this committee to have a very meaningful role in how we engage in our UPWP.
Thanks, Tegan. Yeah, Tom, Beth?
Thank you. I just basically want to put my support on this too. I agree with the items that Daniel and Eric brought up. So I think it makes a lot of sense and will help us have more time to discuss the things that we really need to be discussing. Thanks.
Thank you. Len?
Thank you. So are these changes visible to the administrative and finance committee?
Hiral, do you want to take that one?
Sorry, Len, did you say, are we going to take you to the administrative and finance?
I'm just saying, so as you know, we have our quarterly meetings, and they're pretty detailed. So I'm trying to understand whether the changes that are made are visible to that committee in budget. So any changes in your budgets made, are they visible to that committee?
No, not as, right now, we don't go through the project budgets in that committee. However, we do provide the schedule of operations to this committee, which on a quarterly basis, which would update like any project budget changes throughout the year. I know there's going to be conversation of how to inform the committee about some of these project changes, or the budget changes. But I think right now we have a process in place where the schedule of operations or the quarterly reports would inform this process.
Okay. Because what I was getting at is if these were visible to that committee, then that committee could just be more responsible for oversight. So it would be like, okay, folks, for those of you who are really interested, pay closer attention to this. Because, all right, well, I am supportive. It's just a way of finding out whether there's an easy way to get another set of eyes on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Did you have another comment, Tegan, or I saw you hand went
No,
down?
sorry, I wasn't sure. I didn't see if Pearl had started to respond yet. And what she said is true. They're two different budgeting. They're two different budgets, right? And they're different conversations. And so, but to her point about the quarterly schedule of operations, we have a process in place now where you see quarterly what is happening with our expenditures on these different projects. We can talk about whether that's the reporting structure that makes sense for this committee, whether we talk about it more, whether we adjust that somewhat, and that should actually probably pretty easily bring the transparency around the spending to this group. But then again, it's sort of like we do need to just talk about is that generating the conversation that we want to have here.
Daniel.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want on this, the budgeting, I guess, administration and finance, and then the operations report. Just to be totally blunt, I tend to glaze over on that report. So I think some, I guess I would imagine that if, we might set some kind of threshold of like, or just kind of highlight if there's some projects that need to have major changes in their budgets, which would affect the actual, outcome or the result of the study for some reason or other. That's more of what I'm thinking of. If there's like going to be a significant change to the that would, again, like I said, just change the outcome, or perhaps limit the outcome, or maybe make it more robust for some reason because it needs a little bit of extra funding. So that's more of what I'm thinking of. It doesn't need to be every single dollar that changes hands, doesn't need to be seen, in my opinion.
Sounds good. Any other questions. So it sounds like there's definitely interest in reducing some of the administrative burden that goes into revising the UPWP. I think we just need to think about whether that, which administrative burden is, if it's on the federal side or with the MPO specific public participation procedures. So I think the much easier sell to federal highway would be the latter, to update that and think about, I think the format you mentioned, Sandy, might be appropriate more on the MPO level to have if it reaches 25% change within a larger category, that's when it would trigger maybe a UPWP committee review and more detailed review by the MPO, but the existing one might be okay. I mean, how many times did UPWP get amended last year? I believe it was just one amendment, right? I mean, I don't know how extensive that burden is on the federal side.
Yeah, I think I think last year was once, but the year before it was 3 times, and we're anticipating that if the current procedures were in place, we'd probably have to do multiple amendments in 23 just due to all of the uncertainty. And Derek, we have a kind of more in-depth research memo that we've been working on that we'll send you that reviews more of these options in greater detail. So we can go back and forth about how best to present it to FHWA.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So let's chat kind of offline. We can discuss options and go from there. But yeah, this was a good discussion, so thank you. So I think with that, we can move to, agenda item 6, which is members' items. Does anybody have any items they would like to share with the group? See none. I think we can move on to agenda item 7, which is next meeting. I believe the next meeting is proposed to be on April 7th at 9 a.m. And at this, we would review the universe of proposed studies, because I believe that survey will be ready to share results for and begin the process of selecting studies for the 2023 UPWP. Okay, sorry, I think it's April 14th because of the change in the meeting schedule. Is that right? Would it be April 14th? Yes, that's the next one. Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, that. So wait, are we changing? I'm confused. Are we changing the MPO meetings from the 7th of April and 21st to the 14th and 28th? Or I don't know. Maybe we're talking about that at the MPO meeting next. Yeah.
Yeah, taken.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel, we talked about that. I mentioned it in an executive director's report in a prior MPO meeting, and it probably just quickly went by. But essentially, at the time, we were both concerned about the potential of the extension of the open meeting law, exceptions expiring by then. And also we were looking at the TIP schedule and sort of where it made most sense to have our meetings. And there was a combined benefit of having a 3rd meeting in March and moving the 2 April meetings out a week so that we could more evenly space it and be able to have our conversations about the TIP in a good sort of measured way. But also it gave us some space in case there was the expiration of those, the ability to meet virtually. But now we can continue to meet virtually. I think it's until July. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but so that's no longer part of the issue, but it does match the TIP schedule well. So you should have in your calendar, I believe it's, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. We should be holding the 31st of March, correct? Please someone correct me if I'm wrong. And then the 14th and 28th of April.
Okay, I think Rushine has been sending me the meeting notices, and I, for some reason, can't really access them. So if it's updated on the MPO calendar on the website, I can just grab them from there and update my calendar. I would also point out, of course, April 21st is school vacation week. So that's another good reason to avoid that week.
Yes, they're not yet updated on the calendar. So we should do that. We'll get on that.
Thank you.
taking so Tom, can you, at the MPO meeting, can we get this all cleared up then? Because I'm confused too now.
I will grab my notes, make sure I have it straight, and I will restate the dates again, the date change again for sure. And then we'll make sure it's updated on the calendar for you all.
Thank you.
And we'll make sure to clarify for the committee as well. Because I know I was not aware that the 31st was a possibility, so we might do the 31st of March in addition to the 14th. So we'll get back to you by email.
You mean for the UPWP committee meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can talk offline, Derek, about what works for you as well.
Perfect. Yep. That sounds good. Sounds good. Any other items? Seeing none. So I think with that, we can move to adjournment. Is there a motion and a second to adjourn? Eric?
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Thank you all.
And
Thank
I'll
you.
second it.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Is there any objection or questions? I think, okay, so all in favor of adjourning? Say
Aye.
aye. Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, I think with that, we are adjourned then. So I'll see you at the MPO meeting at 10. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Aye.
Thank you.